Welcome to another edition of Conversations with and for Entrepreneurs We Love. My name is Craig Oldham. I'm a managing partner and advisor at Madlow Executive Advisors. And today I'm with Joe Cordeaux, one of our new executive advisors. Joe, how are you?
Good, Craig. How are you today?
Oh, fantastic. We got some good conversations today talking about how you make the transition from a good idea to a sustainable business and how you kind of get over that hump. So I'm excited to talk to you about this. I know you have a lot of experience around this, and maybe you can just tell our audience a little bit about yourself, since you're kind of, I wouldn't say new, but newerish here.
Sure. Thanks for having me. So I am the principal of At Scale, which is a B2B marketing consulting and advisory firm. But before that, for many, many years, I was a CMO in technology and services companies. And I focused in a couple of different areas. One area I focused on was startups who were grasping with how to go to market and how to drive scalable growth. And I did that for several, and I'm happy to say that we achieved several successful exits in the process. And also, I have been a CMO at large companies, a $500 million company. And I learned quite a bit there in terms of being able to scale companies that are more mature in size and some of the organizational dynamics you need to overcome to be able to do that.
Oh, that's great. And you're such a great addition to the team in that
you've
really taken all these businesses like from this very good idea, right? Hey, I'm an entrepreneur. I've got this awesome idea. I've got this great product. I'm passionate about it. I've got a lot of emotion about it. How do I kind of build that, right? And so when you have that, there's often these good ideas, but there's really no guarantees to success. And so as you've kind of seen all of the businesses that you've worked on, from founders, entrepreneurs, can you boil it down to the secret sauce? Like, what are the 2 to 3 critical traits that you see these things being successful as you've been able to transition?
Yep, absolutely. So the first one I'm going to speak about is something that I don't think most businesses do, certainly not most startups. It's really define your business. What is the definition of your business? What is the market you're going to focus on? Who is your target? Who is the buyer, et cetera? And with that, do you have a business strategy? Does the CEO have a business strategy? That combination of being able to define a business and a business strategy becomes the North Star for all the other functions within the company. It certainly becomes the North Star for marketing to be able to define the go-to-market strategy. And I'll give you a quick example. There's a company in Boston called Bullhorn. They're software as a service. That company now is well north of 200 million. I joined that company was 2.5 million. And even at 2.5 million, they had defined their business and they had said that Bullhorn was going to be software as a service for the staffing and recruiting industry. At first glance, that's so what? But it was in 2005. And in 2005, customers were worried about software as a service because they were trusting their data to a third party. So it was not established as a technology category. It was just emerging. And some of the dynamics that were taking place in the market at the time is companies were saying, well, we understand you have that capability, but we'd like the software on premise, or we'd like some kind of hybrid solution. Bullhorn, in strictly defining its business, said no to all those things and was able to create a very focused business strategy as a result. It meant no corporate HR. It meant staffing and recruiting only. It meant we were going to automate the front-end processes of a staffing and recruiting firm. It meant we were going to put all our resources and investments into making software as a service work. So that became the business strategy. And in turn, we were able to use that as a North Star to create the go-to-market strategy. The second thing, so it's not enough to define your business and not enough to have a business strategy if the people around you don't buy into it. And there are too many startups and too many companies where very seasoned people come in and other people, a variety of talent and experiences come in. They have different ideas. about the business. They have different objectives, even letting personal objectives get in the way. Everybody has to buy into the business strategy. In the case of Bullhorn, for example, we did not have a VP of sales, for example, who were bringing corporate HR deals to us and wasting time and creating a distraction. Everyone bought into the fact that we're solely focused on staffing and recruiting, and with that, you can build momentum. The third thing is really about activity. So most people believe activity is a good thing. It's really not a good thing. It's a little bit counterintuitive, but in a lot of startups, people do, especially on the marketing side, activity for the sake of activity. And oftentimes it's throwing stuff against the wall to see what sticks. And that's something you don't want to do. So once you have this North Star associated with defining the business and business strategy, once you have a go-to-market strategy, you have to believe in that go-to-market strategy. You have to have the courage of your conviction. You can't have a go-to-market strategy where you define it as a campaign and you go out and execute that campaign and look at the results a week later and say, we need to try something different. This didn't work. You have to believe in the basis of that go-to-market strategy. And of course, you have to make changes along the way, but it has to be purposeful. It has to be systematic. It has to be grounded in the strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. So Joe, if I'm catching that right, strategy, organizational buy-in, and focus on the right activities.
Correct.
Yeah. No, I love that too, because we talk a lot about that here, which is why it's so great that you're here. All of these things are aligned. And that's one of the things about all our advisors. We all believe in the same type of thing, which is really around strategic alignment, making sure everybody's there, that your organization's bought in, you've got the right technologies, you're focused on the right activities, and you're measuring what you do. So I think that's a recipe for success.
And of course, that activity has to be grounded in strategy, but most of all, within that strategy, getting into the details, it has to be grounded in knowing your customer, knowing your competition, and of course, knowing the strengths of your product.
Absolutely. You know, it's so important because I think so many times when you, and I don't know, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. A lot of times when you're dealing with startups, entrepreneurs, founders, and because there's so much emotion wrapped up into this, that a lot of where they can get to, and mind you, you can, I believe, and curious to get your thoughts too, I think you can get to $40 million just on your intuition. But at some point,
I wish.
At some point, you do have to have some external factors. Yeah, you've got to really understand the market, and I think a lot of times founders and entrepreneurs are kind of internally focused. Do you find that to be true?
They are very internally focused, and that's a really interesting observation, Craig. One of the things that I do that I just measure, it's an informal thing, but I measure the health of a company based on the fact whether or not people in the company are talking about their customer and competition. Mm-hmm. You'd be surprised and maybe you wouldn't be, how many companies are out there, to your point, they're internally focused. They're talking about the company, they're talking about the product, they're talking about marketing ideas, creative, whatever it may be, everything except for the customer. Who is the customer? What are they interested in buying? Why do they want to buy it? What is it going to do for the customer? Of course, the competition. What weaknesses does the competition have that we can exploit?
Yeah.
So yes, that insular thinking is just a huge impediment to a company growing.
I often equate it to a cocktail conversation, right? So if I walk into a cocktail party and you've got, well, when we could, we're going to be back to that in a moment. So you walk up to the cocktail party, the last thing you do is talk about yourself, right? Everybody's like, who is this guy, right? So you've got to kind of get to know your audience and who you're trying to sell to and understand their needs. And it's the same kind of idea, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is a recurring pattern I've seen in every company I've been in that's either gone public or sold at a high valuation.
Yeah. No, absolutely right. You know, I saw this, you and I were chatting about, which kind of prompted this conversation, which is there was a Harvard Business Review article around why startups fail, and there's really kind of no guarantees to success. And they talk about this idea of cascading miracles. And I think you make your own luck, and I don't think it's a miracle that you achieve growth. Sometimes it's luck, sometimes it's not, but I think you kind of make your own plans, as we've kind of been talking about being focused. So when you think about the three ideas that you have, externally focused, you're talking about strategy alignment, buy-in, activities that are focused on your business, your go-to-market strategy. How do you think you fundamentally make the transition from that good idea to a sustainable growth in business?
Yeah, I think, you're going to assume a couple of things up front in this conversation. One is that you have the right product market fit. So everybody needs wind at their sails. So you have to have the right product market fit. And then, of course, you have to have some level of capital to be able to execute on it. But then what it comes down to, if you have those two givens, is determining how am I going to crack the code on growth. And cracking the code on growth, in my mind, and again, I've seen this repeatedly, is focused on three things: knowing your customer, knowing your competition, and of course, knowing your product strengths. And getting into that in a little bit more detail, because there's nuance there. It's not just a question of something out of B school that's elementary, but there is nuance. So knowing your customer, today, there is so much data available to marketers. With some work and some research and making that data available, as well as speaking to customers, of course, and spending time with them, one can find out what a customer's buying cycle is like. What are the dynamics associated with a customer buying, and how do they buy? And I'll give you a very quick example. When I was at PeopleFluent, which was a medium-sized $125 million software as a service human capital management software company, competing with the giants, Oracle, SAP, Workday, etc. There was no way that in PeopleFluent, and they were going after the same customer, enterprise HR, there was no way that PeopleFluent was going to have a larger sales force than Oracle. They weren't going to spend more money on branding. They weren't going to spend more money on marketing, but we had to do something different. And what we did there is we cracked the code on how enterprise HR was buying, which was these enterprise HR organizations would have individual contributors or HRIS people go out and source solutions on the web. Mm-hmm. And so what we did is we understood that, and we understood where they would source those solutions on the web. And then we would create a message that was specific to what their needs were, that aligned with the strengths of our product, exploited competitive messaging, and positioned ourselves so that as they did these searches on the web, we were brought into the deal flow and competing in deals with Oracle, SAP, and Workday, which is where the company wanted to be. That was the business strategy. Not my choice, but that's where the company wanted to be. And it was just knowing those buying dynamics to be able to do that. What was the result? Well, the result was marketing contribution to closed sales wins went from 7% to 94% in 2+ years. Yeah. And a tremendous sea change just by knowing who the buyer was and how they buy. Bookings growth after several flat years increased one year 48% and the following year 47%. Yeah. So knowing your customer is critical. Second thing is knowing the competition. How do you exploit their weaknesses? And this is something that I firmly believe in. I'm a hard believer, especially in the B2B world, of hardball marketing. Hardball marketing doesn't have to be, and there's actually a book about it. Folks should Google it. It's called Hardball. That kind of marketing doesn't have to be offensive. What it has to be is aggressive and bold. And it can be subtle in many ways. So an example, going back to the Bullhorn one, we had software as a service at the time when all our competitors were old school on-premise client server software. And we took advantage of that. Our messages were all about place your candidates, which is how recruiters realize revenue. Place your candidates 24/7 from your mobile phone at your kid's soccer game. We constantly communicated messages that fed into that kind of emotional marketing and painted this portrait of anything else being old school and not part of what modern staffing and recruiting was. Not modern technology, because recruiters don't care about technology. They'll be the first ones to tell you the technology doesn't place people, I do. So what we did was we communicated about the recruiters being modern and contemporary, using our technology, and everything else being old school. So being able to exploit competitive weaknesses is huge. And then the third thing, obviously the strengths of your product. How do your product strengths align to what buyers need? In that case of Bullhorn as an example, software as a service, available on your mobile phone, being able to place candidates anytime, everything tightly integrated. As one customer said to me when I was interviewing him, this product speaks to me. So being able to communicate to people what that product is and strengths so that you can elicit a reaction from somebody that says that it speaks to them. I had other people tell me, Bullhorn is an extension of me like my mobile phone is. You really couldn't ask for more in terms of knowing your strengths and being able to communicate that to your audience.
It's very true. And those insights are amazing. I think that, I'm curious to get your thoughts. If you really look at these three pieces that you put together, customer, competition, product knowledge, and understanding, and you really can triangulate them together, you almost get these dynamic insights into your sector and into your business that might actually lead you to a place where you feel like, hey, maybe I'm in a different business than I thought I was in, for example, right? So you see brands make this transition, and I use this example often, which is Apple, because you see them making this transition from a computer company to a phone company to a lifestyle brand, right? And so it's very interesting because you can tell by the way that they've expressed themselves. Lululemon is the same way. When they made, women's athletic clothing, to the acquisitions they've made now with a company, I believe it's Tonal, where they're actually getting into more of that space. And what they've realized is they're more of a health and wellness lifestyle brand, and clothing happens to be a part of that, and other things can be a part of that, and allows you to kind of extend that brand out. Do you find that, like, if you actually embrace those pieces, that you can fundamentally change the way that you view your business and change your sector, honestly, right? When you really kind of think about it.
Absolutely. That's absolutely true. And that's why it's so critical to define your business and have a definition. It's not something you get locked into. When you have a mindset associated with defining your business, you're actually thinking more broadly and more strategically. And you're acknowledging the fact that we're going to define our business in a context that works today to help us grow. But because we're defining it and we're thinking at that level, we're going to be open to broadening the definition of that business over time. And because we're going to marry that to knowing our customer, knowing our competition, we're going to be open to being able to make changes, because customers are going to help lead us into other things and new things, just like you mentioned what Apple was doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a lot about, understanding your brand, the permissions you have, and the extensions you can go on. It's amazing. Joe, I love your thinking around this. Amazing that you were able to join us today. Thank you so much. Thank you for being part of the team. It's always awesome to hear your thoughts and your insight coming with your experience. And please, let's do this again real soon.
Thanks, Craig. It's been a real pleasure and a lot of fun.
Yes. Thank you for joining us on Entrepreneurs We Love, conversations with entrepreneurs we love. And we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much.